Hi there. Welcome to this podcast for answering question 4 for Edexcel Unit 3A, the surgery paper for GCSE History. A PDF version of these notes, along with other resources, can be found on relentlesshistory.wordpress.com, and you can follow on twitter.com/bracinghistory. Okay, let's get started. Question 4 is simply about utility. It'll identify two sources to compare and give you a focus. Be aware of the focus. Here it's investigating public attitudes to anaesthetics in the 1840s. So you have to bear that in mind whilst answering your question. You have 10 marks available for this. That would give you approximately 15 minutes, but don't go over. Remember, the big mark question at the end is where you need to be able to score quite a few points. When we see the word useful, it is focused on the utility of the sources in respect to the focus area, as we said, focus on the public attitudes to anaesthetics. Here we have the sources. We see a letter from Charles Dickens describing the benefits to his wife of using chloroform during childbirth, followed by a cartoon showing ether being used to replace a woman's head. Of course, that can't happen, even in today's medicine. What we see is what people perceive or are pointing fun at the possibilities of what operations could in the future do. If we have a look at the Marx Game, it's really quite simple. Focusing on the content of the source or on its nature and authorship gets you a level 2. To get a level 3, we simply apply both of those criteria. So the key thing is focus on what's useful in the sources, but also focus on the type of source it is. If you can do that, you will get a level 3. So let's get started. If we see this answer here, I've highlighted certain elements to this. Source F shows that people were willing to use chloroform in the hope it would relieve pain. I insisted on it. I've highlighted in blue aspects of specific evidence, and this is good practice. The candidate then says, this shows that doctors weren't always listened to. The source does nothing but sings the praises of chloroform. So here it's identifying the impression the source gives. Dickens describes all the benefits without any negative aspects. I'm convinced in its safe use. This shows that some people didn't think it was safe to use, and Dickens is trying to convince them otherwise. So it's thinking of the purpose of this source. So impression and purpose are applied, but then in the green we actually see the marks being given. I think this source is quite useful, so these are applying a judgment to the historian, as the writer has nothing to gain from being positive about chloroform. Also, he describes its use on his wife during childbirth, and I don't believe someone would put their wife and child in danger if they thought otherwise. So what the candidate has done here is he's applied the content of the source and given a judgment based on that. At the moment, this would score level 2. If we have a look at the Marx scheme, source F tells us about the value of chloroform in childbirth. So what we see here is content being given. Maximum of 5 marks if level 2 criteria are met for only one source. So the tops it would get would be 5, but more likely 4. But now we see it moving on. Source G is a cartoon, and therefore its main purpose is to entertain. Being a cartoon, the picture is exaggerated. It is ridiculing the fact that now some people felt anything could be done with the use of ether. Here we see the nature being applied. The nature of the source is to entertain. Therefore it's an exaggeration. This isn't as useful to the historian because its purpose is to entertain and can't actually represent public opinion, as it's not aimed at a particular point of view. It's more an observation. So they've applied a judgment based on the nature. There's a little bit of content in there, but not a whole amount. I think the letter is more useful, although it's biased. The cartoon is more inaccurate and more exaggerated. And so here they've applied conclusion, answering the question. The critical thing for this question is as follows. Look at the nature of the sources. Look at the content of the sources and say which is better. In the 15 minutes you should do as follows. 1. Describe the content in the sources. Say which one is better and say why. Then, have a look at the nature of the sources. Say which is better and say why. Finally, come up with a conclusion. It could be that one is better at content and one is better at nature. Make a decision. There isn't a right or wrong with this, it's subjective. Apologies for the little pop-up that came up here. My computer's running a bit slow. I hope this has been useful. Remember, 15 minutes, content and nature, that will get you a level 3. Remember to make sure you're answering the question at the end. I hope this has been useful. Good luck in your exams. If you need any more resources, relentlesshistory.wordpress.com.